I want to recap just in case you weren't here when we started this sermon series. The first week, I talked about C.S. Lewis and the 4 types of love that he identified in a book that he wrote. And in his book, he talked about each type of love and also the sort of the dark side of each type of love. And he used the Greek names for them. The first one is storge, which would be, we would understand it as affection for our family, that kind of love. The second one was philia, or the love of a friend, which he thought was the most pure kind of love because there was no attachment through the family, that it was a kind of love that you chose for each other. And then, of course, eros, which is romantic love, which is sort of what Valentine's Day is all about, and agape, which is the unconditional love, the relationship we have with God. The giving of the love that we do not deserve, that is pure and holy and wonderful. And I read to you from a man named Nouwen, whose journal, where he explained that we all have an empty place in our souls that can only be filled by knowing our Creator, by being in relationship with Jesus and allowing ourselves to be fully loved. He also identified that it is hard to let other people love you if you do not love yourself. And so often, having a love for God and with God is part of opening that empty space in our souls and allowing it to be filled, right? And then last week I talked to you about Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages. And this is a book that I use with couples, and I know that families have used it, and it's a wonderful thing. And it was so funny because after lunch at my house, my son and my husband, they both got online to take the survey to figure out what their love languages were. And then we had a wonderful conversation about their results, right? And guessing which ones we thought they were going to be and which ones they actually were. And it was very surprising. And I had several meetings in Oklahoma City this week. And one day, John drove me over on Thursday. And as we were coming back, we stopped by Stillwater to see our son. And one of my love languages is acts of service. And Paul he's an RA and he has a room by himself, and he has this little like bar sink with one cabinet below and one cabinet above, right? And literally the whole teeny tiny countertop was stacked with dishes. The sink was stacked with dishes, and there was a small pile of dishes on the floor, right? Paul's love languages are words of affirmation and touch, physical touch. And so I asked him if I could do the dishes. He knows I hate to do the dishes. I hate to do them at home. I always made the kids do them. And so he said, "No, Mom, you don't have to. I know you hate the dishes. You don't have to do that." And then I said, "But it would be an act of service." And he goes, "Oh, yeah. And then that's your way to love me." And I said, "Yes." So he let me do this huge pile of dirty dishes. And then he said, when it was done, "I'm so glad it looks so much better in here," you know. And so it's funny how knowing our love languages and being able to talk about them helps us understand when someone is trying to love us. Even if it isn't our primary language, I could have just put my arms around Paul and said, "I love you," and he would have known that I loved him, right? And he didn't need me to do those dishes. But I wanted to do them because that's one of my love languages. It's one of the ways I say, "I love you." And so I think it's really important that all of us explore not just the love languages that we have with our families and our loved ones and even our friends, but it's important that we explore our love language that we have with God. And I brought that up last week. We don't all respond to God's love in the same language. For some of us, it's prayer. For some of us, it's music. For some of us, it's reading the scriptures, right? For some of us, it's just the beauty of being outside and being with God's creation. And so each week we've talked about different kinds of love and just really how important they are. And so We've been using the text from 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind, right? The text that we always hear at a wedding, almost always. I have it over here in the hearts on the buffet. But I think that we need to talk for a second about why did Paul write this section on love? On a love that doesn't boast, a love that isn't angry, a love that isn't impatient. Why in the world did he see the need to write these words to the people in Corinth? Now, last week I mentioned that they were a rowdy bunch, those people in Corinth, and their church was one that it turned out from the reading that they had had some division in their church. There had been some, what I call one-upping kind of thing going on, right? In the beginning of 1 Corinthians, we hear this because he says, "Now I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you be in agreement, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be united in the same mind and the same purpose. For it has been reported to me by Chloe's people that there are quarrels among you, my brothers and sisters." So this language of love is embedded in this understanding that there is great division in the church, this new young church, right? And so in an effort to teach them the value that each of them have for the community, he uses this wonderful imagery that I have already shared with the children on the body, right? So if you want to join me, we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 through 27. I have the NRSV version, and it reads like this. "For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in the one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, we were all made to drink of one Spirit. Indeed, the body does not consist of one member but many. If the foot would say, 'Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body,' that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear would say, 'Because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body,' that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God arranged the members of the body, each one of them as he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many members, yet one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, 'I have no need of you,' nor again the head to the feet, 'I have no need of you.' On the contrary, the members of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And those members of the body that we think less honorable, we clothe with great honor. And our less respectable members are treated with greater respect. Whereas our more respectable members do not need this." This is so interesting because it makes me wonder, who are our less respectable members, right? But in this culture, at the time where Paul writes this letter to the people of Corinth, they have a definite hierarchy in their culture. They are very, very divided between the haves and the have-nots. And so this concept in Christianity that slave or free are equal is a radical, mind-blowing concept for them. For us, we live in a nation that claims that we are all valued, right? We are taught from the time we are young that our opinion matters. But you have a whole different type of thing here. You have very distinct class systems. And if we were to be honest, we still have that in our country. We still have the haves and the have-nots. We still have those that maybe would be considered less respectable. church members. But God has so arranged the body, giving greater honor to the inferior member, that there may be no dissension within the body, but the members may have the same care for one another. If one member suffers, all suffer together with it. If one member is honored, all members are honored together. Now you are the body of Christ, and individually members of it. It's just a beautiful message. And this is what is written directly before the love language that we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks. It's almost so simple, it makes me wonder, is there really a need to have a sermon about this? Don't we all get that every part of our body has value? Don't we know that even the littlest thing can affect our whole being? Anytime someone is in pain, it changes their whole personality, right? That there's something about constant pain that affects the way they interact with other people. I was hiking at Canyon Camp last week just because I had 7 hours to kill. And it's so rare that I just have 7 hours to kill, right? And at Canyon Camp, it's outside Hinton, Oklahoma, there's no internet. So there's no way I could work or do anything like that. And I thought, I'm always talking to my people about doing things for your spirit, taking your Sabbath time. So I went on this wonderful hike through the canyon, and I got to the top of the ridge, and I made my way all the way around. And there was a rock the size of this rug, and I was just walking across it, and I slipped. It was kind of mossy and wet, and I was so thankful I wasn't at a cliff, right? That I was on a nice flat surface. But I slipped, and when I slipped, I landed on my lower back, but I reached out with my hands to try to catch myself so that I wouldn't hurt, right? And my right hand, I shoved into a cactus. And even though I landed with my full weight on my back on the rock, I didn't even notice the pain in my back because my hand hurt so much. So then I spent time gently, I just laid on the rock and I slowly picked each one of those little tiny cactus thorns out of my hand. And I'll be honest with you, I still have about 4 or 5 of them in my hand. And for days, I couldn't, if I held the steering wheel, it hurt my hand. I'm right-handed, and everything I did hurt my hand. And I got them out as well as I could, but there were some so deep that I couldn't get them out, or they broke off in my skin. And the cactus that I hit had little tiny thorns, but it also had 2-inch thorns. And so it's just been so interesting that when I really hurt myself, and I'm so thankful that I landed so squarely that I didn't break a bone, or I didn't crack my back, or I didn't, I'm having some bruising, but that's all. But this business with my hand is so nagging and irritating and so painful. And I'll forget for a few minutes, and then as soon as I pick something up or I use my hand in some way, it comes shooting. The pain is a constant reminder of how important my hand is. When I was growing up, we went to a doctor who was a podiatrist, and he had been my grandparents' next door neighbor. His name was Doc Crotty. Well, all the guys on the football team called him the witch doctor because they had no idea what he did to make them feel better, but they knew it worked, right? And as a podiatrist, his premise was that the feet were the foundation for the entire body. And that if our feet were out of alignment, if we didn't wear shoes with proper support, he hated flip-flops. And he made you wear shoes with arch support and a certain kind of sole and the whole thing. And so Dr. Crotty believed that if you could align your feet and get them right, then everything else in your body would align because you walked on your feet. And so when I was playing basketball, I'd sprain my ankle all the time. And I'd go to Doc Crotty and he'd say, you have 4 sprains in your right ankle. And he would manipulate all the bones and then he would tape it together so it wouldn't move. And then he'd make me wear tennis shoes 24 hours a day. I mean, when I was sleeping, I didn't have to wear them, but like I had to shower in tennis shoes. My feet were not allowed to touch the ground because he said that my foundation had to heal before I could put any stress or strain on it. And I know many people who go to chiropractors, and I've had friends who were chiropractors who fully believe that the spine is the most important part of the body, right? And if we align the spine, then the pains in the other places of our body will go away. It's the same premise that Doc Crotty had about the feet. And either one of those professions could argue their point, right? And so I think it's so interesting that here Paul so clearly says, every single part, right? Even the stinky feet are so important that they work together, that they are one. And as the people of Christ who claim to be the body of Christ, it is so important that we love each other well, that we work together, that we all do our part, even the unglamorous parts. It's so interesting that the kids name things like the lungs and the heart, right? Those things that they've never seen. And they know how important they are and how we couldn't survive without them. Richard Hayes, in his commentary in The Interpreter, says, in the body metaphor, Paul goes farther than before to validate the legitimacy and importance of these weaker and less honorable members within the community. Not only are they indispensable to the healthy functioning of the whole body, but God has arranged the body in such a way that the greater honor is given to those in the natural order of things that might be despised. Because God has arranged the body, it's an interdependent organism with an amazing amount of diversity, right? It's not that it's the same thing over and over again, that every part is different, every part is beautiful, every part has multiple functions. It's amazing to think, I'm just constantly amazed to think at the way the design of the body and just the amazing things that it can do. And on my hand, the white blood cells and the things of my body started working to get rid of those thorns from the cactus. And after 3 or 4 days, those things that were embedded in my skin came out, right? Those things came out on their own, and I didn't have to do anything. It was a natural functioning of the body. Paul calls us to be united in our purpose, in our care and concern for each other. He doesn't want people who just proclaim a belief in Jesus. He wants people who live out that belief, people who love each other well. I found this a couple of paragraphs in this book, Postmodern and Wesleyan, and I want to read to you what Terry Thatch has to say. I believe the answer, at least in part, is that Jesus' core message has largely been lost in contemporary Christianity. Over the past several hundred years, the influence of science and modern philosophy has made the church more concerned with defending the objective truth of its doctrine than with practicing Jesus' way of love. Do you hear that? He says the church has been on a defense, right? It's been lining up its sources and trying to defend against the voices on the outside. That the church has been so busy saying we're not like them that we forget to be like Jesus, right? He says, I believe that Christianity has proven itself resilient and self-correcting over the centuries. Today, postmodern expressions of the church are challenging the disembodied holiness of modern faith and recovering essential formational practices from pre-modern times. Christianity involves both a way and a creed. By creed, I mean a set of claims or statements that one accepts about the nature of the universe. Creeds also offer claims about how God acts in the universe. But Christianity also offers a way, a pattern for living, a set of practices to follow. In fact, in the earliest days, Christianity was actually called the way that Jesus lived his life, the way that we are expected to copy that way of life. Jesus was mainly inviting people to follow his way, his path to God. And the earliest accounts of Christian practice include prayer, study, sharing food and fellowship, and the celebration of the Lord's table. Jesus described the holy life in very practical terms. Here it is: love for God and love for others. Loving relationships are the sign of the true disciple. As Jesus memorably said, "Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples." Not only that, Jesus says that those who embrace his way of love will be able to do even greater works than he did. Imagine, to do even greater works than Jesus did. How can this kind of love be formed in us? The historic answer is this: it's by spiritual practices that form our souls in the likeness of Christ. So as we finish this conversation on love, I invite you to grow in your faith, to practice your spiritual disciplines, to grow in a love for God and neighbor, because that is how someone will know that you are a person of Christ, that you are part of the body united, that you want the world to be a better place.